Hey everybody, I wanted to talk about the truth in the renting versus buying argument. For many generations, the American dream has always been to buy that perfect home with the perfect white picket fence and plenty of yard space for your dogs and for your kids, and you're going to grow old and retire there. And all that sounds perfect, but as the times change and the generations change and the economy changes, that might not necessarily be the end-all be-all or the best option. And I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both to help you decide for yourself what you think the best option is. Before we get started, make sure to like me or follow me on Instagram at @ThatRealEstateBro, and also like my Facebook page at Alex and Deb Sell Charleston. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with some of the advantages of buying a home. When you buy a home, it's an appreciating asset, which means that over time the value of the home increases and you're basically making money just by living there. That ties into your mortgage, which every mortgage payment, part of that payment goes into the equity of your home. So when you factor in the amount of equity you have into the house, plus the amount of your appreciation rate, you could either, it's a great way to start building wealth, but also if you move out of your house in 5 to 10 years, you could end up with a really nice payday to help you in whatever your next move is. So that's pretty sweet. It also comes with its own set of personal liberties. Like you can design the house how you want. You can typically have more space than if you rent. You can create a space where you feel like you're at home a little more. You have more privacy. And most importantly, you have pride in knowing that you own a home, which is by and large really not a bad option. But that also doesn't mean that everything about owning a home is perfect. So in order to start up your mortgage, for most mortgages, you need at least 3% of the home's value up front, in addition to closing costs and lawyer fees and all these other things, and inspection reports, origination fees, and all these other kind of things that might come up that's going to make your first day of signing on for your home extremely expensive. And it's going to take you at least 3 to 5 years to save the money in buying a home versus renting to make that money back. So that's a huge factor to consider. It's a long-term commitment, and it's an expensive startup. Taking that a step further, even though part of your mortgage does go into the equity of the home, there's also other things that you're paying for that aren't going into your equity at all, and some things you might not even be able to control. You might worked into your mortgage. If you put less than 20% down, you have private mortgage insurance, which isn't necessarily a bad guy. And we're going to talk about that in another video. So don't let that detract you from buying a home. But also on top of that, you have interest payments, flood insurance if you live in a floodplain. Homeowner's insurance is a lot more expensive than renter's insurance. And then you have maintenance costs that could come at you by surprise, and they could get really pricey. It's not just fixing your drywall or replacing a light bulb. You could end up having to replace a roof. You could end up needing to replace your HVAC unit. You could have a plumbing problem that causes flooding and leaking throughout your house. And all those things are extremely expensive to pay for. And especially if you bought an older home, there's going to be a lot more things you're repairing over time. So it's just more factors to consider. It's also a lot more difficult to relocate once you buy a home, because once you buy it and you live in it, first off, if you don't live in there more than 3 years, you're not making all the money back you spent just to get the home. But you also have a lot more trouble trying to sell a home and buy another one than if you just had a lease and you broke a lease and you went and rented somewhere else. So those are a couple of the disadvantages. We can talk about some renting now, because there are some great advantages and disadvantages of that. Some of the advantages is typically your startup for your rent is only 1 to 2 months of the rent for whatever it is you're renting. Moving that a step further, you don't have the surprise maintenance costs associated with that. If you have the exact same problems of leaking or flooding or roofs needing to be fixed or HVAC units needing to be replaced, you don't have to pay for any of that. You just call someone up and they take care of it. Really, the landlord, they're the ones that take care of it, which is a really sweet amenity. Also, it's a lot easier to relocate. So say you choose to have a more transient, explorative lifestyle, or you work on contract, or you're a travel healthcare provider. Any of those things, it makes a lot more sense to rent because you can get in and out of a rent pretty quick. But paired up with that, there's also disadvantages of renting too. So even though your rent is fixed per year, that rent rate's going to increase every year, probably close to about 5%. So over time, if you're renting for more than 3 years, you're going to gradually start paying a lot more for renting with no return on that money than if you had just bought a house in the first place, if you're staying in the same spot for a while. You also don't have any additional financial incentives because you're never going to see that money again aside from your security deposit. You also can't personalize your space. You can't make it feel like home. You can't control your neighbors anyway, but if you live in an apartment and you have thin walls, you're going to hear everything that's going on around you. And that's not really pleasant either. You also don't get any tax benefits at all. Another advantage of home ownership that I should have mentioned is that depending on what your tax situation is, you could actually get tax incentives and write-offs from owning a home, whereas with renting, that just doesn't happen. Those are just some of the main advantages and disadvantages of buying versus renting. Just to help you guide in your decision. What it really comes down to, actually one more thing, we were talking about some of the advantages of renting and talking about return on investment. When you go to buy a home, you're going to spend thousands of dollars to start that up, and with an average home appreciation rate of about 3%, it's going to take you longer to recoup that money. Versus, say you took that same thousands of dollars, but you chose to rent, you could put that money into, and talk to a financial advisor because I'm not that, but you could put that into either a long or a short-term index fund where you know you're going to get a return of 3 to 7%. So strictly from a financial standpoint, putting all your money into a home is not the only way to get a return on your investment. And that is another important factor to consider based on where you're at in your life and what it is you're looking to do. But moving along, we can get past all that stuff now. What it really comes down to is where you're at in life and what it is you want to do. So regardless of whether you're renting or buying, you want to make sure that you're making the right decision for you and your situation. You can afford home ownership if that's the route you want to choose because it is a long-term investment and it's hard to get out of a mortgage. But really you just want to be comfortable and feel like you're ready. And that's pretty much the biggest factor to consider on whether or not you buy or rent. That's pretty much all I have for you. Just take that for what it's worth. My next video, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about PMI, and I'll have many more videos coming out past that. So stay tuned. Take care.